release last night, the WNBA PA, the Players Union, they're crashing out. They're crashing out, and they look less and less professional by the moment. Fans are recognizing this. There are things that they cannot keep this from getting personal.
That single remark captures everything that has gone wrong with how these negotiations have unfolded. The WNBA Players Association recently released what many see as one of the most poorly framed labor statements in modern sports. The public reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Fans who once supported the players have now shifted their sympathy toward ownership. That reversal is not what normally happens in a labor dispute. So how did the situation deteriorate so badly?
This was their statement, quote, you may be like, Rhodes, you got glasses on. Yeah, because they released this statement with this tiny ass writing on it. I don't think, no, that doesn't do anything for increasing image size like that. So, at midnight, the 2020 WNBA WNBPA collective bargaining agreement will expire. Despite demonstrating our willingness to compromise in order to get a deal done, the WNBA and its teams have failed to meet us at the table with the same spirit and seriousness.
To understand that, it helps to examine the sequence of events. On January 20th, 2025, at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, the 2020 WNBA collective bargaining agreement officially expired. Several days before that deadline, team owners made a deliberate choice to publicly announce there would be no lockout. It was a calculated move that instantly placed them on higher moral ground. Instead of responding with comparable restraint, the Players Association opted for a different tactic by placing an inflatable rat outside the NBA store in New York City. Yes, a literal protest rat. The intended symbolism was obvious, a traditional labor protest image. But the message it ultimately delivered was that billion-dollar professional basketball negotiations were being handled like a dock worker strike. In today's labor disputes, optics matter greatly. The side that appears more reasonable usually gains public support, and public support is especially vital for the WNBA. This is a league that has never turned a profit in its 29-year existence. Player salaries are largely funded through NBA subsidies and ownership's continued willingness to invest in a league that routinely operates at a loss. When negotiating from that reality, looking unreasonable is not an option.
The Caitlin Clark boom, they care about that kind of shit, but actual sports fans don't. Not only do they not care, they don't want to hear about it. So, let's keep going here. Players care deeply about their fans, take pride in honoring that loyalty every time they take the court. The league's tactics harm current and future players and marginalize the very people who show up for the game in communities across the country. This misguided approach will not work. In the face of the league and team's actions, players remain undeterred, unafraid.
Now consider the contrast between the two public statements. The Players Association released a lengthy 347-word declaration filled with phrases such as pay equity is not optional, outdated provisions that no longer belong in women's basketball, and claims that owners are threatening player livelihoods while deliberately running out the clock. The message framed the dispute as a moral struggle rather than a financial negotiation. By comparison, the league's response consisted of just 73 words. It was professional, concise, and focused squarely on business fundamentals. It highlighted the league's unprecedented growth, reaffirmed a commitment to significantly increasing player salaries, and emphasized long-term sustainability. One statement sounded like it was written by activists preparing for confrontation. The other read like it came from executives trying to finalize a deal. Fans noticed immediately. Comment sections across sports media reflected a clear shift, with many previously sympathetic voices now saying things like, "I'm siding with ownership at this point. The union has become unbearable."
Secure a transformational new CBA. This agreement must include a salary system tied to a meaningful share of the revenue that would not exist without player labor, mandate professional working conditions, and require protections that honor players who built the league and set the next generation up for success. Make no mistake, pay equity is non-optional, and progress is long overdue. We urge the league and its teams to meet this moment. The players have already and will continue to do.
So what is actually being negotiated? The growing divide between what players are demanding and what owners are offering explains why tensions have escalated so sharply. Ownership has proposed substantial salary increases, including more than doubling the current average player salary. Maximum contracts would rise significantly, and rookie-scale deals would see notable improvements by standard labor negotiation measures. For a league that has never been profitable, this represents a strong opening offer. However, the players are seeking something owners cannot realistically provide right now: a 50-50 split of gross revenue, similar to what NBA and NFL players receive. At first glance, the request sounds fair. Athletes in profitable leagues typically receive about half of total revenue, so why shouldn't WNBA players receive the same? The answer lies in basic math. Revenue sharing only works when profits exist. In the NBA and NFL, expenses are covered and massive surpluses remain, which are then divided. The WNBA, on the other hand, loses money every year and is subsidized by the NBA to the tune of tens of millions annually. Asking for a percentage of gross revenue in that context means asking owners to absorb even larger losses as the league grows.
I mean, people are like team owner at this point. I mean, they have made them. If it's amazing that WNBA players made themselves feel even more insufferable than prior. That's amazing to me. That's even possible. A lot of people. Insane statement from the PA. There we go, right there. Second comment. Insufferable Players Union. Their statements are as nasty and uncouth as their attitude. It's wild. Yeah, I'm team owners. Have been for a while, even more now.
This is where timing becomes critical. The WNBA recently secured new media rights deals that will significantly increase revenue starting in 2026. Agreements with ESPN, Amazon Prime, and other platforms could potentially triple or quadruple annual media income. That is meaningful money, and it could make the league profitable for the first time in its history. But that revenue has not arrived yet. Owners are still operating on projections rather than concrete financial results. After nearly 3 decades of funding losses, they are understandably hesitant to commit to a revenue-sharing model before knowing whether the league will truly sustain itself. This is why the timing of these negotiations feels so frustrating. Had players waited until 2027 after 2 full years of media revenue, negotiations would be grounded in proven profitability. Discussions could rely on real numbers instead of estimates. Players could point to documented profits and credibly argue for a share. Instead, they are pushing for a revenue-sharing agreement before anyone knows whether meaningful revenue will exist to divide.
That they can never have. That's a good point. That is a good point. This is wild, and it sadly looks like no season. No one cares. Goodbye, Caitlin Clark, 2026 season. They're literally comparing playing basketball to manual labor as if that's the same thing. Sorry, bees. I didn't know it was this. Hard to hoop. Do us real hoops fans a favor and cancel the whole effing league. You bees make well enough money to survive.
But the underlying problem goes beyond money and timing. It centers on how the Players Association has chosen to frame the entire negotiation. The language used, terms like pay equity and regressive provisions, cast the dispute as a moral crusade rather than a contractual discussion. That framing represents a serious strategic mistake. When a labor dispute is presented as a social justice issue, disagreement becomes synonymous with moral failure. Anyone who questions the demands is positioned as being on the wrong side of history. That approach may work when confronting genuine discrimination, but when applied to negotiations over a professional sports contract in a league that has never made money, it feels manipulative. It suggests an attempt to apply social pressure to force financial concessions rather than winning the argument on economic grounds.
They got the wrong people involved in these negotiations. You know who should be leading them? Caitlin Clark. Because you can tell she understands the balance that's got to happen. And I will go back to my original statement I made when the news started breaking that they were going to pursue more money and break off from the CBA. I said, you're doing this 2 years too soon. All right, you need to wait till the new media rights deal actually starts. You need to wait till that media rights money starts getting into owners' pockets, and then they can sit back and look at where the league is and how much profit they're finally making, because they should make some profit now.
Fans see this clearly. Online discussions are filled with people pointing out what they believe is obvious. The WNBA is not underpaying players out of bias, but compensating them based on what the league can afford. That is not injustice, it is economics. When financial reality is framed as oppression, credibility erodes among everyone except those already ideologically aligned. This dynamic highlights a long-standing challenge for the WNBA. The league has consistently tried to be more than basketball, positioning itself as a cultural movement and a platform for political causes. While longtime supporters embrace that identity, it has alienated casual fans who simply want to enjoy the sport. Last season, Caitlin Clark drew millions of new viewers who came for basketball, not activism. Yet during these negotiations, the Players Association has returned to the same messaging strategy, prioritizing ideology over financial reality. As a result, fans who tuned in to watch Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese compete are now watching the union compare its situation to exploited laborers while demanding revenue sharing in a league that has never produced a profit. The contrast with ownership's messaging could not be clearer. Owners speak about growth, sustainability, and building on recent momentum. They sound focused on preserving and expanding what exists. The players, by contrast, sound confrontational. What makes this particularly disappointing is that the players have legitimate concerns. Working conditions historically lag behind other professional leagues. Travel was often economy class, facilities were inconsistent, and salaries forced many players to compete overseas during the off-season just to earn a living. These issues are real, and according to reports, ownership is addressing them. Proposed agreements include improvements to travel, facilities, working conditions, and pay. Instead of highlighting those gains and negotiating remaining differences, the Players Association has chosen aggressive rhetoric and protest tactics that undermine public support. A potentially collaborative negotiation has become an adversarial spectacle, and the union is losing the public relations battle. If talks collapse entirely and the 2025 season is lost, the consequences will fall most heavily on the players, who would lose their income completely. Owners would lose money too, but they have been absorbing losses for nearly 3 decades already.